This has been one of the really, really good discussions to think about, that why isn't Bukit Vista expanding to other regions? Why are you really just in Bali? And I have a really great story about a business case study from another mega Airbnb host in the region. His name was Tu. Actually, Tu is still alive. Why did I say was? Tu is still alive. And Tu was an Airbnb Air Scout when the platform was just getting started. So what the job of an Air Scout was, they don't have Air Scouts anymore, was to go out into the property marketplace and find properties and list them on Airbnb. And these Air Scouts would get paid. And so Tu was one of the most prolific Air Scouts in Vietnam. And so he was doing a very, very good job in Vietnam bringing together hosts. And then Tu became somewhat of a host supervisor. He became a host hypervisor. He had a whole community of hosts and property owners that would access to gain Airbnb guests. And so that was very similar to what my wife and I had done at Bukit Vista. So we had a very similar development. And for a while, Tu was on a rampage. He was on a crazy winning streak, climbing. He had for sure more than 200 locations throughout Vietnam. He was going to be a Vietnamese national hero. He was adding architectural offices and cafes, and he was on YouTube with the top vloggers in Vietnam. He was doing really, really well. And then the start of COVID, it all came down for Tu. So what I understood was Tu had used a merchant model to expand. He basically would pay ahead, lease out properties, and then the owners would essentially, he would be a tenant in these properties. Now during COVID, when there was no more income coming in for 2 years, you can imagine how painful that would have been in terms of the business case. So I went to talk to Tu because our first encounter was actually at the Airbnb host conference in Paris, where unfortunately we all suffered a terrorist attack on the evening before the last of the 3-day conference, and so the event got canceled basically. Tu was very confrontational. He already heard about our reputation as Bukit Vista here in Bali. He was all up in arms about I wasn't a serious or authentic enough host because I didn't meet my guest anymore and I didn't have, let's say, guest follow-up service. He was determined to really prove his vision was a more correct vision. So when I sought out to seek him out actually on a trip 2 years ago to Vietnam, I went specifically to Christina's. This is his home headquarters in Ho Chi Minh City. And I went specifically to ask him what happened. So Tu avoided me for about 2 days before he couldn't avoid me anymore because I literally booked an Airbnb inside his home and residence, and he has got like a 7-story, really tall, skinny. It's kind of like a skinny hotel. And they have a beautiful co-working and shared space at the bottom. It's really cozy. It's got a very, very good energy, like the way good restaurants do. And so Tu came downstairs eventually and we talked. And we talked about something that I think, and I'm getting to the point here, which is the main condition that is really, really difficult to understand as an entrepreneur. When do you stop believing in yourself, and how do you should stop believing in yourself? What do I mean by that? So you can probably imagine that as an entrepreneur, you came from, let's say, an environment where everybody around you was not entrepreneur. They were employees, they were going to get jobs. And so you defied popular wisdom, popular advice. You didn't listen to people, and you became successful. You started your own business, you made your first deals, and you're on your way. But then after a while, you build up momentum. How do you, when you should start listening to people who can tell you to avoid falling off a cliff? Now, at a certain point, we reflected both seriously on this, and it's a tough question. I mean, if you're successful as an entrepreneur, you bet on yourself, and why would you believe what anybody else tells you? They tell you to go left, you don't believe them, you go right, you found gold. And so if anybody tells you to go back left again, why would you ever listen to them? But at some point, you will come to a point where the risks are probably so not casual anymore. They're so certain that you need to start listening. And so we reflected on this really painful and emotionally complex situation for the better part of an evening, having coffee and I think even smoking cigarettes throughout the evening. But eventually the sad realization was every founder has to go through a catastrophic failure in order to learn this thing, because unless you really fail in a catastrophic way, you're never really going to hear the feedback that you really need to hear. Eventually, I thought about this for a few years and I came upon a really interesting conclusion, which is try to disassociate as much of the emotional situation from what you're facing as a founder so that you're not looking at it always through how you feel as a founder. Because oftentimes as a founder, we're very compelled to defy the status quo. We're very compelled to be rebels, break rules, and we get enjoyment out of that. But if we try to, let's say, imagine how other people in the system can feel about our entry points and our actions, then we might be able to use design and also use empathy to forecast what are the likely ways that the world is going to react to us without having to make the mistake ourselves. So strangely enough, that's a lesson of how deeper empathy can actually be a superpower to prevent failure. Because if you're able to, let's say, inhabit the mind of an employee before, let's say a critical employee, before they decide to resign, or you're able to inhabit the mind of your customer before they decide to switch to another brand, if you're able to inhabit the mind of your investor and to, let's say, please them before they withdraw their funding, then I think you're going to have superpowers and you're going to be able to forecast a dire situation before it actually has to befall you. So this is a bit of a longer than my usual shorts, so I'm going to break this up, but I hope that this type of advice can be taken seriously and can also benefit anybody who is serious thinking about how to become a founder and some of the perils of how being a founder, the emotional experience is certainly different than other type of work. All right, that's Jing again here in sunny Bali. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode.